Hi, I'm Mike Ryan. We've spent a lot of time on our blog discussing different types of turquoise, the different turquoise mines, and that's understandable because this is turquoiseinamerica.com. But in order to understand how the turquoise market developed, we also have to see that within the context of the development of tourism in the Southwest. There were several factors that contributed to this. The first was economic. In 1908, there was a severe recession, and the turquoise market at that time really never recovered from that. At that time, as we tell in Turquoise in America Part 1, 1890 to 1910, the market was dominated by East Coast jewelers who only wanted the clear sky blue turquoise. And as that recession ended, there were other changing factors that were involved. Some of these were social trends. The Victorian era had ended in 1901 with the death of Queen Victoria, and we were seeing a change into a much more open artistic expression and change in social values. The arts and crafts movement from England was very popular in the United States, and the arts and crafts of the Southwest Native Americans really fit in perfectly with this trend. The tourist market was essential to the development of turquoise in America. It began with the railroads, primarily the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe. With that came the hospitality industry, was really founded by Fred Harvey and his organization, where you could now get wonderful meals and have a wonderful place to stay in their hotels. And also there you could buy a curio, you could buy a arts and crafts piece that you could take home with you as a memento of your trip to the Southwest. This really gets involved in the supply chain, where you had the miners in Nevada, Colorado, supplying the turquoise to wholesalers, early on mostly in Los Angeles, who would then sell to Indian traders and the manufacturers in Albuquerque, Gallup, and Santa Fe. Finally, we had the retailers, and the dominant retailer early on was Fred Harvey through their Indian department. So let's take a look at some examples of that developing Southwest tourism market, which was so important to the turquoise market. You know, when you're on a long train ride from Chicago to Los Angeles, you're going to spend some long hours going across the Kansas prairie. Now, that is very, very beautiful, but it can get a bit tedious. And one of the profit centers of the Fred Harvey organization were their newsstands. And as their tourist involvement grew, they added a series of publications that they sold at their newsstands. And I thought it'd be kind of fun to just relive what a traveler on the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad would be reading on their way west. So here we see a publication called The Great Southwest. And we see this very romanticized notion of these Indians on horseback, and they're looking out in the distance at the first Santa Fe train. So that sort of sets the tone. We'll just open up here a bit. It's a pretty old publication, 1911. So what we're really going to see, of course, they have some very flowery language describing the old history. And then we just have a journey along the way. We're starting here at Garden of the Gods, there at Pikes Peak, Colorado Springs. Further down, They're going through the Raton Tunnel over the Raton Pass. And here we have Apache Canyon going from Las Vegas into Lamy, New Mexico. Of course, we see the Indian there with their wearing their blanket. And of course, looking forward and saying, where are we going to stay tonight? Well, the Ortiz looks nice there at Lamy. We'll stay there. Then going on to the flagship of their hotels in 1911. It had been built in 1902 is when it opened, the Alvarado in Albuquerque. And those of you who know Albuquerque now, the Alvarado's gone, but you can certainly see Albuquerque was very different in 1911. Then at the Alvarado, when you got off the train, you'd have to pass through the Indian building to get to your lodging and the restaurant. And there, of course, you see sort of this staged entry of all these natives with their pots out. Then you'd walk into the room itself. Now, interesting here, we don't see any jewelry. 1911, the Indian jewelry market had really not developed. We see lots of pottery, and we see weavings, and we see baskets. And that was primarily the market up until about the mid-20s. Most of the Indian jewelry at that time on the reservation was very heavy. It was for their own personal use, and they wanted heavier was better because that was a storehouse of value, and that signified your wealth. And it could also be used in the pawn system on the with the traders on the reservation. Here we have one of the brilliant strokes of the Harvey Company when they had Elle of Ganado, a woman who had been recommended by John Hubble at the Ganado Trading Post, and she went to the Alvarado and set up her loom, and we have one of the first instances of a living diorama there. And I imagine by the time the travelers had been prepared by reading this material and then getting into the Indian room and seeing Al, they were certainly ready to make their purchases. When we do see the Indian jewelry market developing, again, the Harvey organization takes a lead in this because they started manufacturing much lighter jewelry. You may have seen some of the Harvey-style jewelry, much lighter. Some of it very nicely handmade. A lot of it was also machine manufactured to keep the costs down. And this has been a problem in the jewelry market ever since, when machine-made jewelry is passed as handmade. So let's take a look from here at some other items that you could purchase at the Fred Harvey newsstands. Here we see some examples of postcards. And postcards really have been forgotten in this age of emails and TikToks and whatnot. But it used to be a very popular way of communication because, sitting down and writing a letter took a lot of effort, and you're out on vacation as a tourist, and time is at a premium. So here we see on this one, this is from 1912. We see an example here on the right of the extensive network of the trains and the various locations of the eating houses and the hotels of Fred Harvey. I want to read a little bit here what they say here. This says, everything fine and dandy, nice and warm, no snow in sight. Don't you wish you were with me? Tell Lou hello. Will write from Frisco if I can. Bye-bye, M. Sounds like something you might get today if you were lucky enough to get a postcard. This one here is an example of an actual postcard of a turquoise mine. And you don't see too many of them because, looking at a hole in the ground is maybe not that all that exciting unless you're a turquoise lover or a turquoise miner. But this is the famous site near Tyrone, New Mexico, of the Azure mine. And we tell this story really in detail in Turquoise in America Part 1, 1890 to 1910. Over here, we're seeing, I think, a really cute, wonderful example of some marketing expertise in putting all this beautiful jewelry on this lovely little girl and the wonderful expression that she has. And boy, is she really loaded up with some beautiful jewelry. Here we see an example of a native jeweler using the old hand drills in order to drill turquoise beads. And this particular model was known as Zuni Dick. And he was very famous during this period of the 20s and 30s and would have many photos taken of him. These last two examples are interesting. They don't show jewelry. They don't have any turquoise here, but they're done on a yucca plant. So it's on a real thin piece of yucca, and we see this beautiful kind of hand-drawn drawing here of a weaver. She'd be a Hopi maiden there making a sash. And then over here we see a basket dancer. And I just thought this is just an example of a beautiful little craft that someone would pick up as a curio, send it home. As we see here, it says, "Here on a 3-day pass visiting Carlsbad Caverns. Sent to Miss Lee Reagan, 52nd Street, Brooklyn, New York." So we've seen here different examples of how the developing tourist market in the Southwest was so important to the development of turquoise mining in America.